Welcome back to the Spreadsheet Skunkworks. Now, if you want an introduction to this video series, you can check out the first video in this video series. But today, we're going to get straight into the spreadsheet. And hopefully you've watched the first two videos in the series. So this is as far as we got at the end of video 2. So we're able to color the board. We've got a macro that runs when we click this color board button. And then we can change the color in these cells. And those colors will be reflected immediately in the color of the board. Just demonstrate that quickly. There we go. And we've got some loops, some formatting code, some paste special code we had a look at last time. So some really useful techniques all working together to do this job really quickly at the click of a button. So what are we looking to do in this video? Well, clearly we need to do something with the kind of coordinates here. So we've got the numbers up the side and then the letters across the bottom. These require some formatting too. And we're going to use the same idea. It would be nice to have two cells somewhere near the board, or I think eventually we'll shift these cells to another sheet, but a cell somewhere where the user can change the formatting in the cell, and that formatting will be reflected once the color board button is clicked. But this raises a few questions, particularly about how to select these cells, how to reference these cells. Referencing ranges of cells is often complicated in VBA, but it's a really important technique to master. So what do we need to be aware of? Well, obviously we could use a simple address or range reference here, range B3 to range B10. That would work perfectly fine. But what if the board were to move somewhere else? We want to keep our options open, flexible, and the board might move somewhere else later in the design process we're going through. So rather than hard coding the cell references, which will be one approach, it would be better to use the anchor cell. Remember, we've got a named range here. Use the anchor cell as a starting point and then do the references in relation to the anchor cell. That will mean we can subsequently move the named range, move the anchor cell, and the code will still work. So this is a very important issue in spreadsheet development, in coding, programming generally, building something in so that it's flexible, and if the design changes later, the code will still work. The code will support design changes. So let's get into this idea. So we want to format the coordinates, the numbers up the side, and the letters across the bottom. So I'm going to use the two cells. Let's just put some information in here so to remind us what the cells are doing. We've got the black cell and the white cell. Then let's have numbers and letters. So the formatting in this numbers box, we want to copy paste the formatting, paste special over these cells here. So let's put some formatting in there now. Let's just put a number in there. And then I like Franklin Gothic, what's it called? Franklin Gothic book. Just outside of your screenshot there, Franklin Gothic book, I recommend. I just think it looks cool, although that's certainly like a subjective matter. Alt-HAC on a PC. Alt-HAM on a PC is going to do the justification, so it's now in the middle of the cell. Seems sensible to make this bold, Control-B, italicized, Control-I. And then, yeah, I think this will do for now. Later, because of the way we're building this mechanism, of course, we can easily adjust the formatting on the cell and those changes will be reflected. But that will do for the time being. And I'm just going to adopt the same formatting for the letters. So do I need to go through the formatting process again? No, I don't. I can just copy paste the formatting, Control-C, Control-Alt-V and T on a PC, copy paste the formatting down. And there we go. Okay, so the formatting's ready. So let's go into the Visual Basic editor and let's start thinking about how the code is going to work. So this is the code we did last time. And yeah, we've got to think about where we're going to put this code. I think it's sensible to put it at the bottom in this module somewhere. I think I would put it at the end of this routine. Instinctively, that's where I want to put it, but for the purposes of the demonstration, I'm going to put it at the top of the module so that it's easier to see. It's more visible at the top. So how are we going to get started with this? Well, let's think about how we're going to do the referencing. How are we actually going to tell Excel which cells that we're talking about? And we spoke about using this anchor cell we've got here, literally named anchor cell. So let's begin with anchor cell, and I'm just going to pop the code in here at the top. There we go. So there's our starting point, range anchor cell. So, and obviously we could just continue the code, do the simple selection of a single cell that you're probably familiar with. We can see the cell has been selected there. So this is a starting point, and again, as I said in the last video and in previous videos, it's all about being steady, systematic. You can see I'm doing something very easy first. That gives us a foundation, and we can push forward from that. So when we're selecting a range of cells, I talk about the range method. So first range, and then two ranges in the brackets. First range and then two ranges in the brackets. The first of those two ranges in the brackets tells us the top left-hand corner of the range we're looking to select. The second reference in those brackets tells us the bottom right-hand corner, and Excel will select all of the cells in between. Okay, so for example, so let's get this range kind of construct written out for us here. So if we were to say range anchor cell, and then range anchor cell, so what do we do if we want to move away from a cell? Remember, we're giving the second reference, the bottom right reference now. So we want to move away from anchor cell a certain number of cells. Let's just try this. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's make a little bit more room here. Okay, so just trying to work out what's going on here. Range anchor cell, range anchor cell. Okay, that looks all right to me. Okay, dot offset 80 dot select. Okay, what's happening here? Does this work? Just going to simplify this. Yep, this is working fine. So let's try this, 80. Okay, there we go. Yep, this should work okay, but let's test it. So I'm going to use the step into function here in the VBA editor, debug step into. So powerful to view Excel alongside the VBA editor. Use the F8 key to step through the code. Excel will execute the code one line at a time. We can look in Excel what's actually going on. Really good way to learn code. So I'm just hitting the F8 key now. This is the line of code I want to execute. So what do we select when we execute this line of code? Okay, so I can see that's almost accurate, but not quite. So the selection, yeah, it's one cell too high. So I want to bring the selection down one cell. So how am I going to do that? Well, this first component of what we have in the brackets, the first component specifies the top left cell of the range that we're looking to select. So if we make an adjustment here, I'm going to introduce an underscore here, and an underscore just allows us to continue the same line of code on the line below. So it's good for visibility, for you being able to see the code. A simple adjustment here using offset should move the beginning of the selection one row down. So range anchor cell to offset 10. Anchor cell is here. Offset 10 is going to move one row down, 0 columns across. So that should get us to B3. And that means, yeah, that means we should get the selection we're looking for. So I'm stepping through the code again. Okay, there we go. So it seems to be working well. So we've got the range technique here. So one range outside of the brackets, two ranges inside of the brackets. The two ranges inside of the brackets specify the top left and bottom right hand corner of the range that we're looking to select. So this is a reasonable start, but what are we actually trying to do here? We're trying to copy paste formats from the cell that we've used to store the formats. So first we're going to have to copy some formats, and again I think it's sensible to give this cell a name, because we've said subsequently we're going to move this cell somewhere else. So numbers format is an informative name for the cell. Then let's say letters format here. So we've got two cell names there. These are going to be helpful, and it means if we move these cells somewhere else later on, it's going to be easy. Those references are going to stay in place, so it means we're building some flexibility into our approach. So what are we looking to do here? Well, firstly, if I could, okay, yeah, let's just use the range name here, so you can see in the top left hand corner, here we go, numbers format, just using that name, dot copy. Okay, there we go. So that means we're going to copy the cell here that we're using to store the numbers formats. Just use the F8 key to step into the code there. So that seems to be working. Now, rather than selecting this range, so we've used the range method to select a range of cells, but we don't want to select the range, we actually want to paste special into this range, paste special just the formats. Now obviously I could record the code again, but it's always good to recycle code. If you got the code there already, just go get it. If you know it works, why not use code that we know works already rather than trying to create the code again? So I'm going to copy paste this paste special formats code, which we created in the last video. Rather than select, if I just drop that in there, I think that should work, but it's absolutely fine. Just to test it, I'm going to save the file, Control S, and let's give it a test. Let's see if it works. So stepping into the code using the F8 key. So I've copied the numbers format cell. I can see that. Clicking back into the Visual Basic Editor. Okay, and there we go. That seems to have worked well. Okay, so I'm happy with that at the moment. I'm just going to put some annotations here. We've got quite a lot of code in here now, and I might subsequently come back to this code. I want to be able to understand quickly what's going on. So first I'm going to say copy paste number formats. I'm going to say begin, copy paste number formats, and then another annotation just using the inverted comma key on the keyboard. That means that what we write appears in green, as you can see on the screen, and these annotations will be ignored by Excel when Excel executes the code, so they won't affect the code at all. They're just notes, annotations to help us understand what's going on. So it's sensible to develop the habit of putting annotations in there. It's going to help you understand, it's going to help your colleagues understand, other people working with the code as well. So a couple of annotations here describing in English what the code is doing. So we've got half the job done. Because we've selected, or rather we've copy pasted the formats over the numbers there. So this gives us the letters. Still got to do the letters. So you might want to pause the video now, and from what we've done so far, can you get the letters element working too? So how are we going to do this? Well, again, we could use some organic code, create the code ourselves, but we've got some code here that's doing a very similar job. So let's copy paste this code down and let's just tweak it. Okay, I'm going to tweak the annotations first. So this is letter formats now we're talking about. End copy paste letter formats. Okay, so let's just tweak this code, just got to update it. So the name of the cell, the letters cell, is not numbers format. The name is letters format now. There we go. And then we've got to update these these cell references here. I'm happy with the approach using offset. That is appropriate. You know, the size of the chessboard is not going to change. I think that's a safe assumption to make. So I'm happy using offset here. But these numbers have got to change. The previous copy paste we're doing begins in cell B3, and the offset to get to B3 is 10, which seems to make sense because the named cell is in cell B2, the anchor cell. So what are we going to have to change these numbers to? Well, our new selection, we're looking to select, well, it's one row further down than the end of the previous selection. The end of the previous selection is 8, so I'm going to try 9 here. And then we can also see it's one column across, one column further over. How does that translate into the offset formula? The second component, the offset command rather, the second component gives us the column offset. How many columns do we want to move across? So we've got a 1 there. And then the same for the end, the bottom right corner, the end of the range we want to select. 9 there for the rows. And now we don't want 1, now we're going to want 1 plus 8 is 9. So let's give this a go. Okay, very good. So I'm going to step through the code. There we go. The numbers are done, and then the letters are done too. There's a slight inaccuracy here because we've gone 1 too far with the offset. I had a suspicion this might happen, so let's just tidy that up, adjust the offset, adjust the column reference there. Then let's run the code again, just using the F8 key to step through the code here. Okay, numbers done, letters done, and that's with 100% accuracy there. We're not formatting any of the cells that we don't need to format. Okay, there we go. I'm happy with that. Yeah, one thing it will be helpful to do at the end of the code would be to exit cut copy mode. So you can see here the flashing line around the cell. That would be annoying for the user. How do you stop that? Usually just hit the escape key, and we did cover this in the last video. What's the line of code for doing that? Hitting the escape key is application.cutCopyMode equals false. So let's copy that up, and let's just drop that in. Let's just drop that in here, just for completeness, really, to stop that flashing border. Okay, there we go. So let's give this a go. So suppose we want to have red cell references. Just change the color of the font to red there. Then I'm going to go down one cell, use the F4 key. F4 key on a PC repeats the last action. There we go. And then let's test this. Will the formats be transferred across onto the numbers and the letters? Here we go. Okay. And that seems to be working well. Happy with that. Yep, good stuff. Okay, happy with that for now. I'm just going to delete this white text here. Yeah, and we're getting to the point where I think we have something that's beginning to look like a chessboard. Yeah, I think people would naturally identify that as a chessboard. But we've got some nice features here. We've got these formatting features, so we can easily adjust the formatting of the squares and even easily adjust here the formatting of the references as well. Just going to make these a bit smaller actually. Alt-HFS, font size, let's try 8 in the font size, F4, repeat last action, run the code again. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I'm happy with that for the time being. Yeah, and obviously, you know, yourself, if you want to improve the formats in some way, for example, actually, it would be nice to put a border around the squares, wouldn't it? A nice black border around the squares, so let's do that. So these two cells that contain the formats for the squares, Alt-HOE on a PC, Alt-HOE, then we can work with the borders here. No, there we go. Okay. Okay, let's see what happens now. We can see we've got a border around the squares now. Yeah, but the white squares are lacking a top border, so I just need to pop that in there. Okay, color border. Looking good. Yeah, so really happy with this now. I think the border adds a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to save the file there. So I think this is a sensible point to bring this video to a close, because we've ended one topic there, which is to do with formatting, using loops to loop through the squares, position control, offset, my favorite technique in VBA, so powerful for controlling position. And then in this video we've talked about selecting a range of cells. So we've used the range technique, the range technique, which is what I call it, where we say range to begin with, and then in the brackets we specify two ranges. Now if you wanted to do something less dynamic than this, you could specify normal cell references in there. That's going to allow you to select a range. The first reference is going to be the top left hand corner, second reference is going to be the bottom right hand corner, so really useful for selecting ranges of cells there. And definitely go through the code, use the F8 key. A lot of useful techniques here. The paste special code, often really complicated. If you record the paste special code, it's going to look complicated, so just knowing exactly what you need to do the paste special, that's useful. Also talked about annotations, so if you use the inverted comma key on the keyboard, whatever you write will appear in green. Excel will ignore those. Very useful for understanding in English what's going on. So and some conditional statements here as well from the last video. So lots of really useful coding techniques so far, and it's giving us this really nice effect. The chessboard. Let's just quickly switch the grid lines off, view, and then grid lines. And with the grid lines off, looks even better, I would say. Okay, very good. So a natural kind of conclusion there to the first part anyway of this series. Got a long way to go towards building a chess computer. So what are we going to do next? Well, we've got to think about how to represent the pieces. And I was thinking about this today before the video. So it will be possible to put letters in the cells, something like this. Whoops, Alt-H-A-M, put them in the middle of the cell, Alt-H-F-S, something like this. So P for pawn. Pawn is one of the chess pieces. So it would be possible to put the letters in the cells. Now this is, instinctively, I thought this would be the best way to do it. But the drawback of this approach is that it's difficult to move the pieces around. And I think I much prefer the idea of having some shapes here. For example, we have a pawn here. And then let's just try to put the text in the middle here. Okay, can we do this here? There we go. Okay, so we've got a pawn here, let's say. And then I like the idea of being able to move the pieces around the squares, just like you do on a chessboard. So we're going to try to do this. This presents some challenges, of course, because Excel has to be able to understand where the pieces are. Excel has to understand where on the chessboard the pieces are, what squares the pieces are positioned on. This is what we're going to deal with in the next video. Excel can understand where this piece is, where this shape is on the spreadsheet. Excel can also understand where the cells are on the spreadsheet. That might sound like an obvious thing, but if you've got a huge column here, then cell C3 is suddenly, it's moved way across the spreadsheet. So the location of the cells is also important. But if we can get Excel to understand and to identify those two things, the position of the cell, the position of the cells that make up the chessboard, and the position of the shapes that are representing our pieces, and Excel VBA, using VBA, we can pull out those two pieces of information. If we can do that, we should be able to get Excel to identify what squares the pieces are on. And if Excel knows that, then we can start thinking about things like, okay, where are we going to move the pieces? Things like that. So certainly going to get a bit more intense, I think, in the next video, but there's going to be loads of interesting coding techniques there. Okay, that's it for this video. Hope to see you in the next video in the series.